Tell us about your childhood trauma and what path that took you down.
Well, I think anytime we've been through a difficult past, God is going to take it and use it for good somehow, and He certainly has with mine. My mother almost lost me in the womb. They had to have surgery. I almost died. I went through a very difficult childhood. I was molested as a child, raped at the age of 12, and started very early with substance abuse.
I remember in one of our interviews you mentioned you became a responsible user. So
That's
you
what
had
I thought.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Well, just to fast forward a little bit, after all of that traumatic stuff happened as a child, I got pregnant out of wedlock at the age of 20, and I had my baby, and that was the only time that I stayed straight for a period of time. And I went through so much guilt because when I found out I was pregnant, I was already almost 2 months, and I was like, the weight of knowing that something I did was going to affect my child, it was devastating. So I quit using. And it was a good motivator to not use. But as soon as he was born, I went back, but I consider myself a responsible user. And when I say a responsible user, in my mind, because we create these things in our mind to justify our behavior, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so I thought, well, I'm only doing a line of Coke when I have to work a double shift. And I only smoke a joint before I go to bed so I can sleep. And I would make excuses because it wasn't as rampant as it was before, but it was still that foothold. And as long as you got a foothold in your life, some strongholds are going to come along with it.
I love how you say, I'm only going to do a line of Coke on my stressful days. I'm only going to smoke some weed to go to sleep. That's right. And I remember in my own life, I'm only going to have a season of fun, just a season, and I've learned it only takes that small pinky hold. And then before you know it, the enemy has your hand and then your forearm, and then it's all over. And so you had a Jack in the Box experience in 1998 that changed the trajectory of your life. Can you tell us about that?
I grew up in a Catholic home, so I knew about God and I believed in God. I had a Bible sitting on my coffee table. It had dust on it, and I had no clue what it meant.
I'm a good Christian. I have a Bible in my house.
Yeah, if someone would have told me I wasn't a Christian, I would have been offended, because I would take my kids to church and I would do different things. But I was so broken. And I ended up at a women's conference with a group of women that were just radical. I called them radical Christians, those kind of people. The kind that they invite you to their church and you're like going, yeah, I'm busy that day, like my church was an hour and 15 minutes and their church was like 3 hours, I'm like, there's something wrong with those people.
Yeah.
And people that I knew there, I felt like, they just substituted their old life for their new addiction.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus is not an
Jesus
addiction.
freak.
Jesus is the real deal. So with that being said, I was at the conference and they had an altar call for people to get rid of addictions. And so I stood up and I was all excited. Yes, I'm going to quit everything. This is it. And then I'm like, oh, heck to the no. There's no way. This is all I do. I'm not nearly as bad as I used to be. And so, there's the struggle. There's constantly a battlefield in the mind. And the mind will take you farther than you want to go. And so I sat back down. I was like, no, I'm not giving that up. And then I stood back up again. And then I sat back down. And there was this major struggle. And these women are looking at me like, what is wrong with her? And sure enough, I finally just surrendered everything. At that point, I really feel like I became born again because I actually embraced what it meant to receive deliverance and forgiveness. I walked out of there a changed woman. I tried to smoke a cigarette on the way home. I threw up. I radically was delivered from that. And girl, I went home and I flushed my weed. I just flushed it. I just said, bye-bye, done. Because the freedom that came from that was finally, I had come to the end of myself. And where we end is where God begins.